Today's topic is on AVDF. So we have the product engineering team from AVDF. Joining me is Nazia Zaidi. She is the product manager leading AVDF, and she's based off US. We have Sachin Deshmania. He leads the engineering team, and he's based off India, Bangalore. And I think many of you from the Bangalore SIG, which happened in February end, would have met him in person. And also along with Sachin and his team is Mahesh. Mahesh is also based in Bangalore, and many would have met him in person at Bangalore SIG. And also we have Vijay Medi. He is joining from US. So as you see, we have all the engineering experts of AVDF, and so feel free to learn about AVDF. If you're new to this one, this topic and the agenda is structured in a way where even if you're new to AVDF, you will get an overview of what is AVDF. And if you're on it already, and you've deployed on it, we have structured it in a way to give you the best practices and recommendation. So leverage this one and feel free to ask queries. So you have all the experts. You can use the Q&A panel to post your queries as you hear us talk through the session, and we'll have it very lively and interactive. So you can raise your hands wherever you have questions, and we will pause and take your queries. So with that, let me move over to the agenda. So we have a quick intro for those, a couple of you who are new to what is SIG and what is all about this SIG. I'll give you a brief intro, and let's also take a look into what is AVDF for India, how important, how critical is AVDF in the context of Indian cybersecurity space. And some of the new use cases, the streamlining operations, best practices, and deployment considerations that you might want to know about when you start doing AVDF deployment, and some of the do's and don'ts. Now with that, so what is DBSIG and why we had it? So this SIG, or the Special Interest Group, is a collaborative forum of strategic Indian customers and the product engineering team, the DB Security product engineering team. And the mission is to exchange ideas, discuss the different trends that's shaping the India, and to exchange ideas on how we can jointly protect the databases, the data which is in the databases, protect it against theft, misuse, and other meet the regulatory requirements. Of course, we will share the best practices of deployment, and you can also help us learn if there is anything that you would want in the future, if there is any inputs or feedback that you feel has to be incorporated in our feature or in our product, you can provide us that impact. So it's like a collaborative forum. And as Vipin did mention in the in-person, the hackers do collaborate a lot. We have to be staying ahead of them to collaborate within our known circles to provide in the best of the product features for security. And of course, the SIG is a combination of in-person and virtual SIG sessions. In person, we will have it yearly once, and we will publish the schedule much well in advance. The virtual online SIG sessions are going to be deep dive on different topics, and those topics would be published on the Arstorm Tech Session platform a month or two in advance, so that you can plan to attend those sessions. So feel free to choose the topics of your interest. If you're keen on learning something new, you're welcome to attend. You're welcome to provide your inputs, and you will have all the engineering leads, engineering expertise, the subject matter experts we will bring to this forum, so that it will be very interactive, and you can ask them the queries and not hold back anything if you have any questions or doubts. Okay, so with that, have one query to get started. So if I launch a poll, and if you can help us understand if you have deployed AVDF, which release update are you on? Let me launch that. Nazia, I think you have to trigger this. I'm not able to control. Can you launch that poll?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we have launched that poll, and query is very different. If you are already using AVDF, please help us to understand on which you are on. So once it will reach towards 80%, I will stop it. I will give another 10 minutes, 10 seconds to run this. Okay, so thank you so much for your inputs. I'm ending this poll.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to share that, the results, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so majority of you, okay, seem to be new to AVDF, and you are, it's good, like you're here, you would like to understand AVDF. We have structured our agenda in a way that it's taking into account both the audience. Like if you're new and interested about what is AVDF, yes, this is the place where you have to be in. And some of you are on the latest, are near the latest. That is good. Okay, so with that, I hand over that to Nazia to take over through the session. Thanks, Nazia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angeline. So hello, everyone. I'll start the session quickly because we have less time and we really want to share a lot of information with you. And our goal is towards end, we should have like some 10 minutes left for the open forums so that we can hear your stories if you have any question, challenges, etc. Meanwhile, like Angeline mentioned, we have all experts in our panelist. So use Q&A forum and ask questions. Okay, if you have any question, and any question is good question. So ask anything from the AVDF perspective through Q&A, and our experts will continue answering that. Okay, so I'll focus on AVDF. So what is AVDF? Audit Vault Database Firewall, quite a popular solution, come under database activity monitoring solution category. And there are some very common AVDF use cases that our customers use AVDF for, right? So for example, when it comes to database activity monitoring in mind, the common use cases customer could think of or says or being asked by different analysts is like, let's say you should have visibility of what privileged users are doing. You should be able to do some forensic analysis after an incident. So for example, if you're going through some RBI audit or some breach happens, God forbidden, so you need to provide different audit reports, etc. So yeah, forensic analysis kind of a functionality. You should get notified or alerted if any suspicious activity is happening on your system, or you would like to protect any unauthorized access to your system. Some type of user, some type of connection should not be allowed to connect to your most critical asset, that's database. So you need a prevention and protection from their perspective. And finally, how database activity monitoring solution can simplify your regulatory compliance requirement, right? So overall, high level, this is how AVDF looks like. You have a centralized audit vault repository. You have different sort of targets. You have databases, different operating system targets, and other kind of targets which provide audit data in different format or maybe custom applications. So everything, all the audit data and network events goes to the centralized repository, which is Audit Vault, where you set all the policies, alerts, reports, etc. If you need a prevention layer or protection layer also, along with um, some activity monitoring uh, over the network, which is happening right in real time. So you can deploy database firewall also, and which is like a first line of defense. So either you can monitor or block, or you can just monitor. So depending on your requirement for Oracle, for these databases, right? So at high level, these are the common AVDF use cases, and high level, this is how we deploy and we support AVDF, okay? You think of all database activity monitoring solution ask, and that's what AVDF does, and those are the common use cases. But I would say that beauty lies in details. So let's talk about something beyond those common use cases. Okay. So I'm sure you are familiar of this, and more than me, I'm sure many of you goes through all this RBI audit or MCA requirement day in, day out. And since it has come, organizations are struggling to deploy it and being compliant, etc. Right? So these are the three, I would say, major security and privacy regulations or directives which are driving India market from the regulations perspective, right? MCA where talks about more on the audit changes to every transaction of books of account, more from the accounting perspective, and they focus on three parts, right? I'm more focusing from auditing and activity monitoring, because that's what we are going to cover. Definitely it talks about a lot of other aspect, encryption or access control, separation of duty, etc. But my focus is auditing and activity monitoring. So from MCA perspective, if says when, who, and what, right? It wants to capture all these three, all the changes in these three form. When it's done, who has done, and what data was changed, okay? Whereas RBI is more talking about knowing your sensitive data or discovering your sensitive data, putting a proper control, doing a separation of duty, what DBA can do and what other application user can access, what kind of a data, and monitoring access to that sensitive data, right? RBI is more about that, whereas TPDP is more about uh, putting a responsibility, I mean, being little responsible, and how you are going to prevent any personal data breach. Let's say we had been worldwide, a lot of organizations talk about GDPR and GDPR implementation. I would say something similar in line, but maybe more comprehensive, even more comprehensive than GDPR, right? But overall, if you look all these directives more from the auditing activity and monitoring perspective, their requirements, so their requirements are similar, right? They talk about very first thing that you maintain secure configuration, which means wherever your sensitive data is, you need to make sure that it's protected, that repository is secured, you have followed best practice, you have hardened your systems, right? So that's the very first thing. Then second thing, they talk about control access to sensitive data, right? How you can control that, who can access to sensitive data, how and where, and etc., right? Then the third one they talk about, once you control it, you also need to maintain, if there is audit record of any data changes. That's more coming from MCA, but RBI also been asked. RBI also has mentioned these in some areas, right? And then finally, monitoring access to sensitive data, like who is accessing what, when, how. So you monitor that. So if whatever these three major directives or regulations I have talked about, ultimately, if you look at from the nutshell, from the overall nutshell perspective, that's what four areas they are covering. Okay, so how you can meet these requirements? through Audit Vault and Database Firewall. So we talked about some of the common use cases. So definitely those common use cases also covers these four areas somewhat at some level. Okay, all these four areas, those common use cases also covers. But let's go a little bit beyond also. So how we can meet these requirements through AVDF? The very first thing is maintain secure configuration. We introduce security assessment. AVDF has a capability of assessing your fleet-wide Oracle databases. So security assessment, and where you assess your database configurations and identify if any drift is there when you define the baseline, etc. Second requirement, we talked about control access to sensitive data, which means putting a database firewall layer and protecting from any unauthorized access or prevention from any SQL injection, etc. Then maintain audit record of data changes. So that's a very specific requirement, and AVDF comply with that requirement with our feature before after value change reporting. Okay, and not only for Oracle, but non-Oracle databases also. Over the period, we have introduced for different popular non-Oracle database support as well for before after value change reporting. And the final one is like monitoring access to sensitive data, which is nothing but your comprehensive database activity monitoring solution that AVDF provides you with all the detail, like who has done what, when, where, how. Okay, so that's anyways common one, but how we are doing different small innovations to make your life much simpler, much easier from database activity and auditing perspective. So let's look at this area one by one. Okay, security assessment for database across your enterprise. That's your security assessment for Oracle database. You can have fleet-wide, assessment run for different Oracle databases. It's defined by different categories or different categories under different categories and different risk level also. So it has more than some 65 plus test cases where it looks for best practices from the Oracle perspective, from industry perspective, and tells you that what is your risk scoring, how you are doing by different categories like configuration, privileges and roles, and user accounts, and patch level of database, etc. Right? And if you define any drift, any baseline, then you are able to assess the drifts also. So for example, assessment kind of a activity you do maybe once in a month or once in a quarter, depending on your organization guideline. So how you are doing periodically, is your assessment improving or there are new issues are coming, etc. So we have introduced full-fledged security assessment solution at fleet level with interactive reporting and drift management, etc. So one of the very interesting report, if you are, I mean, most of our users, I would say that customers, they have some 400 plus targets getting monitored. Out of that, I can roughly say 70 to 80% targets are Oracle database targets, and rest of their approx 30% targets are other databases, right? So when you run fleet-wide security assessment on Oracle databases, it gives you a functionality like tells you that what security features of Oracle you are using, okay? And you can even do the drift like on security control that, okay, you were using this feature, but now you are not using it, okay? So for example, very good example here, as most of you know that we are getting away from traditional auditing, right? And we would like you to use more unified auditing. So if I run this and I can see that, okay, there were, my 3 targets -1. So we are slowly, this customer is moving from traditional to unified, and at unified, it's +1. So it gives you a good first view of that what all security features you are using. Similarly, it gives you a very detailed report that what was there, your some different assessment and compared to your baseline and whether you are doing good or you are passing it. So in baseline or selected severity, let's say it was high, and the latest one it's passed, that means you have fixed that issue, etc., right? So those kind of a detailed assessment report along with the drift detailed report, you can have it. Okay. In the recent RU, another thing what we have introduced is that at auditor dashboard itself give you a quick view that if you are running a drift against your security, against your baseline for your security assessment, then giving you a quick chart that how you are doing. Okay, so you saw that detailed report, but before you go to that detailed report, we will give you this kind of information on your dashboard itself, and you click on that and then you just go, then you will be able to go to these detailed report also. Okay, so these are the kind of enhancement we are doing to make our customers life easy, more from the usability perspective. Okay, so another part, database firewall. Obviously, database firewall has a basic functionality or a common use case that it protect from unauthorized access and prevent from SQL injection. And you can define, you can control who can access what kind of data and how, etc. However, if you go a little bit beyond there, we added discovery, okay, discovering of sensitive data, discovery of privileged users, and even user entitlement drifts, right? If what permissions user have currently on your system, and if you run again against the baseline, then how it is changing from one label to another label. You can report it, you can have attestation, etc., when you discover sensitive data or privileged users. So here we introduce a concept of global profiling. Okay, you can create a global sets and then you can use those global sets into database firewall policy. Okay, so for example, we started with discovering sensitive data and privileged user, and then expanded it to other features which other parameters which usually we capture through session context. So like your IP address, operating system, client program, database user, etc. And we introduce a concept of global sets. Okay, so you create these sets, and then in any of the database firewall policy, you go and use those sets. You can reuse it. So for example, I have created a set where I have a PCI data, I have a GDPR data, or I have a RBI specific data, or MCA relevant data, etc. So I created that, and there are different set of privileged users who can access that data. So now I have those global sets, and I can go and define my database firewall policy on all these parameters within our different conditions and select these global sets within the database firewall policy. So that's the enhancement, because earlier database firewall has a concept of set, but it was more a local to that particular policy. It wasn't a concept of global set. So that's the enhancement we did from database firewall policy perspective. Another recent enhancement on the database firewall policy, we have done policies as well as in reporting. And if you are current user of AVDF, you will be able to appreciate that more. In database firewall earlier, we used to capture, so we used to have command group concept, right? DDL, DML, DSCL, and you could define your policy on that. So it was not a fine level of finely scoped commands like under DDL or under DML for a specific command like insert, update, drop, etc., or alter, create, and other, right? So, but what we have done in recent update of AVGF, we have expanded that list for our customer. And that's how we do it for audit collection currently. So now it's more consistent with audit collection, whether you are doing an audit collection like collecting from audit logs of Oracle database, or you are doing a network-based activity monitoring. Both, it's more consistent, it's finely a scope. So you can, specific for specific conditions, you can define your your database firewall policy, and you can use these specific policies, specific conditions for alerts also, and the same will display in the report also subsequently. Another enhancement is before after value change. We started with Oracle, okay? And this is very unique capability for Oracle, because to capture before after value, we do integration with Golden Gate. Unlike others, we were not relying like some outdated technology like Oracle Stream, right? Oracle doesn't. So we were not using something like that. We started using Golden Gate when we introduced AVDF 20. And that's how we could leverage, because Golden Gate supports heterogeneous target, right? So we started with Oracle, and we expanded this list to SQL Server and MySQL. And the latest in release update 11, MySQL is also added. So you will have, what value, some important key values you can monitor as per MCA, like your account records, what was the value earlier and what's the new value and who has done it, etc. Right? So you can, and what's being done, like whether it's updated, deleted, inserted, whatever, so, and what is the old and new value is there. So for different targets, Oracle or non-Oracle, like Oracle SQL Server and MySQL, you can do this. And this is very important from MCA requirement perspective also. So we are engaged with many customers and discussing this particular functionality with them who are in India. And finally, the comprehensive database activity monitoring solution, like who did what, when, where, how. And like I said, this is like a basic requirement for any DAM solution or any database activity monitoring solution. But what are we doing additionally? Okay, so additionally, we understand, we have seen a lot of customers in India, they have like hundreds of targets, right? And if I give you a report which has a number of events, something like that, it's finding a needle in a haystack is so difficult for you. You don't know where should I put my attention, which target is important for me. So we came up with something like Audit Insight dashboard for auditors, where basically every day you are monitoring your top fives users, targets, DDLs, DMLs. So it gives you a bird's eye view quickly. You go and see, okay, if any specific area, any specific user or any specific query requires my attention. So it kind of help you to reduce the noise and focus for that particular day where your attention should be, right? So we introduced Audit Insight dashboard. Similarly, what we did is that I talked about global set concept for database firewall, right? And the same thing, imagine if I can tell you in activity report that, okay, this particular sensitive data is basically part of this global set, or these objects are part of these global sets. These are part of my GDPR or PCI global sets, etc. So that's something we added in our compliance report for GDPR, where you have sensitive data access reports. So we have done that in GDPR. Another thing what we have done is that in all activity report, right? Now imagine in all activity report, if you can have a perspective, okay, I'm looking my this data, but what I would like to know that I have created my set of application IP address set, right? And I want to know what all activities are happening in that particular set. Or I have created a privilege user set for RBI, okay, from the RBI requirement perspective. And I want to know that what those privilege users are doing on my system. So rather than going and collecting and remembering your 10s and 15s and 20s of users and selecting them, now you have a global set created. You just filter on your set and it will say that, okay, under this set, all these users are there and this is the activity what they are doing. So we are kind of making your life easy more from trying to make your life easy more from who is doing what and giving you a fleet-wide, but at the same time, more consolidated view so that you can really relate back easily and quickly. Another functionality what we did is that read-only auditor. That was the requirement from many of you. Many of customer asked for it. So it's more a separation of duty, right? Right now in AVDF, you have a concept of auditor or super auditor. There are two type of auditors are there. But read-only auditor is very helpful where for the improved separation of duty, right? So you create this particular user. Let's say you are going through some audit, right? RBI audit, and RBI is asking you to give report X, Y, and Z on so and so targets. What you do, you create one user, you assign targets read-only user of that RBI auditor name, and then you assign read-only access. You assign target or a group of target to that particular user. Now this user has his own self-service auditor dashboard. That user can go log in, and for whatever the target he or she is allowed, can go and read data, right? They are not allowed to go and define, for example, in auditor in auditor logging, usually you have policies also, but in read only you don't have policies. So you go and you see, okay, what are the targets, whichever the target I have been assigned to, what are the audit trail running, what are their status. You look at the alerts, that what alerts are generated, and you look at the report, and then auditor do all that slicing and dicing they want to do. They do normal attestation process, etc., right? And but they can't really go and modify your audit policy or database firewall policy or all that, right? So that's something is not there. So it's like it's ad hoc access to audit reports with risk of auditor making changes to audit policy. So we don't want you to have that risk. Another functionality, which is again very important and many of you were asking for, how about watching the watcher, right? AVDF is watching all targets and their users and their activities. Who is watching AVDF? So first thing is that AVDF is appliance-based solution, software appliance-based solution, right? We have a lot of we have a lot of hardening at OS and database layer. We have a lot of separation of duty. We use database vault also for privileged user access control. Okay, the way you use for database vault for your enterprise application, similarly, we use that for AVDF repository itself. But beyond that, whatever the user who has access to something, what that user is doing, that's also a question, right? Giving an audit records of that. So we introduce a concept of shadow audit vault server, where basically there are certain auditing enabled at operating system level as well as at database layer level. You redirect all those audit logs to your shadow audit vault server. And here, then you can have your audit reports generated. You can define alerts also in certain condition if you want, and you will have alerts also triggered from your shadow audit vault server. So basically, your main audit vault server becomes a target for your shadow audit vault server. So we have introduced this concept when customer, especially I think RBI was asking for this, and we came up this functionality. Another thing in latest release, what we did is that we revamped our alert UI workflow. It's very simple. You can go and select. We have given a lot of options, like you can define your alerts basis on examples or using different alert policy and just copying it from there, or even like reports, right? So AVDF report is IR reporting. It's a very simple report. So you go and add filters in your all activity report, and from there you copy that condition, and that condition gets copied here, right? So we have revamped this part. We have revamped the notification part also in alert workflow. Another type of collection we added is quick CSV. We were getting a lot of requirement to support many other open source databases which are coming from different vendors, or in different formats. Okay, so it was very difficult to support each and every of those database in different formats. What we realized that CSV is one of the most common format that most of these databases uses. So we came up with the quick CSV concept. At first time, you need to map their collection attribute, audit collection attribute with AVDF. It's a one-time job, and once you do that, and after that, it will keep on collecting those data in that format, and then the normal process of AVDF happens, like you can go have report, alerts generated, etc. Okay, so this brings me to my second question. So we were talking about release updates, like, so all AVDF are in every 3 to 5 months, we come up with new release update, okay? And every release update have security and quality fixes along with new features also, okay? But many of you, we have seen that you wait to deploy them. And we really want to know, if you are existing user of AVDF, we would really want to know that what holds you back there. So I'll launch this question, and I appreciate, help us to get the answer for that, right? So why do you not apply RUs? In summary, why don't you apply RUs very frequently? It's lack of time and resources, concern about update failure, or you feel that currently you are stable and cannot take any risk, or you just feel that it's not worth the effort for periodic updates. It's very important for us to understand this, because for release update, we are getting very mixed messages. Some customers, they do not apply until 5 RUs, different 5 RUs release. And some customers are asking that why we are even releasing in 5 months. They want a release update in every second month or third month or something like that. So yeah, so your answer will really help us to understand this. Okay, I'll let this run for another 5 minutes. Sorry, again, I'm saying minutes, for 5, yeah. So I'll just end now. Okay, so we have collected your data. Thank you so much. And we will connect for this response with you. Now I'm going forward for, next slide, which is we have customers having questions on how we, so there are enhancements we have done to streamline operations, because a lot of you have concern of updates getting failed, right? And or you have a perspective that, oh, it is running fine, I don't want to take that risk and apply it, and just want to avoid that. So keeping that in mind, we did a lot of we have streamlined a lot of operations, and I'll talk about some best practices also on RU. So what operational enhancement we have done? Now we have been adding a lot of pre-checks, okay, from the system requirement perspective. That could be one of the reason sometime customer were facing issue in past, and that pre-checks is for installs as well as for updates, okay? Either you're doing new install or you are doing updates. We introduce a feature like system alerts, where you have a better view or advance notice that, let's say, your storage is going to fill, or there is a password is going to expire, or there is a certificate is going to expire. A lot of preventive alerts, and now you can configure email notification also. Admin dashboard has a lot of information from system perspective, right? How much storage you have used, CPU, RAM, memory utilization, etc. How much data you are collecting and all that. So those kind of, so we revamped this. We are giving you that very proactively, that information. We have started giving a default data retention policy. So earlier it was left on customer, it was higher. So now we are giving that default data retention policy so that you don't by default choose something like 1 year online or something. That's really not a good practice for any database activity monitoring solution. Database uses trace file analyzer more from the better diagnostic perspective. Now we have made this functionality as a default for Audit Vault Server, and we expect now your SRs compared to previously, if you are on latest RU release update where we use release update 11, where we use TFA by default, we expect that your SR time will be much lesser because in first go, they will have better information from the diagnostic perspective. They will be able to diagnose much faster compared to what they were doing earlier. We introduce out of place update with near zero downtime. So you can even evaluate that if you are apprehensive about update getting failed and all that, because in this case, your current release will keep on running while you slowly, slightly, step by step, do your out of place update. And once this update is complete, then you can phase off your current, release, whatever you have, the older release. Shadow Audit Vault Server also from the operational enhancement perspective. Agent perspective also, we did a lot of enhancement. One requirement was coming from different customer, like checking Java versions or combining some libraries in the agent installation, etc. So we added a lot of pre-checks there. We did auto start for agents, so it keeps on checking the health, and if doesn't get response for certain time, it just auto restart it again, so you don't need to really bother about this time. We are giving a downtime report detail where you have, so RBI was asking for from a lot of banks about this report, so we included this report. We included like audit trail collection details, like when the data collection is started, if it is stopped, when it's stopped, it's collected until when, so those kind of a detail. So similarly, like a lot of diagnostic from, collecting trail diagnostic from centralized location like Audit Vault server itself, rather than getting some diagnostic done at the target and disturbing your target. So these are the few operational enhancement we have done, and we feel that it will be very, very important from a customer perspective. Why apply latest release updates? So security is most important. With every RU, we use latest Oracle database release update. We use latest embedded operating system, which is Oracle Linux patch. We fix anything which is reported in CV until that time, and other security improvements, if they are there, we do that. More from the stability perspective, every RU is stable from the previous one, because we fix bugs which are reported by customers or we have internally identified. So those are there. And definitely there are new features with every release. So there is a good balance of security, stability, and new release. Or if any compliance requirements are there, so we introduce those new features as well. Key points for the successful update, I would say do's and don'ts. That's very important. If you're applying update, there are few things you need to make sure. And I have seen most of the time the reason for failure is either it's just randomly started, document has not been reviewed properly, or something like that, right? So very first thing, that you follow the pre-update task as documented. We have a good documentation. We have listed down all that. If you need it, maybe Vijay can handle. Vijay can just, can you give that link in the chat so that everyone have that link where this document, where it is documented. Always take a backup first before you starting your update. If you have done any customization, any schema change, or though it's a software appliance, you cannot really do much of customization. But if there is any customization from the schema and all you have done, make sure you preserve that, you save that somehow. because when you do the update process, you will lose all your customization. Before you start update, you check if you have deployed AVS in HA status, in high availability. Please check HA status. It should be healthy, okay? Ensure that when you, so it has for update, you have a pre-upgrade RPM also. You run that first, okay? And if your pre-upgrade is failed, then you don't go for an upgrade, because upgrade is irreversible. Once you start it, it's not a reversible process. You won't be do if in between it failed, you have to like do the recovery from your backup. It's a irreversible process. So one thing is that when you need to make sure your pre-upgrade checks are successful before you go and start your main update process. Many times what I have seen that your pre-upgrade fails, it says that lack of some storage capacity or something like that. You go and fix it, but you don't rerun this update and then just go and directly apply the update RPM. And then again, your update failed. So you may need to run, keep this in mind, that you may need to run pre-upgrade RPM multiple times if there are errors. So you have fixed issues, then again run pre-upgrade until you get a message from pre-upgrade that it is successful. Do not apply your main update RPM. Do not start that. And that's what we are saying, right? And another point here is that during update, there is a reboot required, right, to complete the update process. So we say that you do the soft reboot, never do the power on off server. When your update fails, especially, don't reboot the system. Please contact Oracle support. So I have seen many customers doing that. When their update fails, they feel like it's something like Windows and let's go and reboot the system and everything will fix, like our laptop. It doesn't happen that way. Like I said, it's an irreversible process. So please contact Oracle support so that we can look at the issue. We can help you to fix that issue. Another thing, do not play with logical volumes, okay? You can extend it, but do not reduce it, okay? So these are the some don'ts and do's we have seen. This list is coming, I would say, mainly from our practical experience. Whenever we have seen any update failure, after reviewing multiple SRs, okay? These are the usually things we have seen our customers are missing. However, everything is documented, by the way. And if there are gaps, we are really filling that up in our documentation. But these are the main things we have seen and we want to highlight here. Okay, so with that, I will pass it to Sachin. And if Sachin can quickly talk about a little bit on the deployment best practices. Our plan is that once the session ended, we will stay here for another 15-20 minutes for open forum. If you have any question, if you want to discuss, please do that. So Sachin, over to you.
Thanks, Nazia. Hello, everyone. Let's walk through some of the best practices while you're trying to deploy AVDF. So as we looked into, there are two parts for it, right? One is for having the audit collection, as well as one sort of source for the traffic is through the network collection. So first we'll go with the best practices of if you have deployed for an audit collection. So what we would like to talk here is what we have to audit in for Oracle database, how we can provision the audit policies from AVDF itself on your targets, how to size the AVDF based on the audit volume you're planning to connect, and what are some of the best practices in terms of deploying this solution here. So when we go to Nazia, can next slide, please? Yeah. So when it comes to Oracle database itself as a target, for the unified audit, we already have some of these, what we can call it as predefined audit policies that one already has in the database. Do not duplicate them. So you have some of these like _, secure config, or the login logout kind of audit policies that are already available. If not, you can also provision them through AVDF for your Oracle database targets. And in the next screen, we'll see how to do that. Now, if you want to proceed ahead with the custom ones, right, you can create custom audit policies and deploy them or provision them. But we would strongly recommend that they should be context based on the use cases that you want to achieve. So in the next one, what we will see is how to leverage AVDF for deploying or provisioning of some of these audit policies. So if you see, we have on the right side, we have the predefined policies that are already enabled is what it is showing here. But also we can go and have provision for the core policies. For example, you can have what we call it as basic auditing. You can go for audit of schema changes, or log on log off events, and so forth. All these can be deployed using AVDF on your Oracle database as a target. Also, if you want to go ahead with some custom ones, what and how they should be. So the next slide is going to talk about some of these context-based audit policies that you can create and provision. It could be around monitoring of your privileged users. It could be around the security relevant events, for example, who has changed the policies on that basis. Or you can have audit policies to check who is accessing the sensitive data. The tutorials for these are all, you have the QR codes here. You can leverage them. And if you want to have a documentation view, you can always go ahead and do it. Now, we talked about what to audit and all that. Now, let's come to see what needs to be done in terms of the capacity of the AVDF itself based on the audit volume you want to collect. So if you refer to our MOS node, which is mentioned here, you can go ahead and do some inputs for the audit vault server sizing. So you have two pieces when we want to collect audit. You have a central repository called audit vault server, and you have audit vault agent. So we'll talk about sizing of both. When it comes to audit vault server sizing, the input parameters could be something like what are the number of audit targets you want to monitor, what is the average number of records, and so forth. Please bear in mind, you have to also take care of the retention policies. So it could be like based on the audit requirements of an organization, you can choose it. You can also input whether you are planning to use in-memory feature. Once you input all this, the data that comes out is the AVSS specification. It talks about the RAM, the CPU, the storage, the IOPS that the server should have. Now, this is all about audit vault server. What about the agent itself? Now, the same spreadsheet, when we input the information from an agent perspective, it points out, Najee, if you can go through the next one. It talks about the audit vault agent sizing as well. So you have to input the number of agents you want to do, the number of trails, and it gives you the agent specification itself. Like how many, what's the spec and all that. So for both this, refer to the same MOS node as we have mentioned here. Now, this is all about sizing. Now, what about the best practices when you want to deploy AVDF as a solution? When it comes to audit vault server, it is always recommended that you configure HA for it for reliable services. And for DC and DR sort of configurations, better to have the primary AVS in the DC and the standby AVS in the DR site. Now, because these are deployed in the DC and the DR, the latency between them has to be minimal so that it gives a good network bandwidth for the traffic to flow between the AVS nodes. As I pointed out, plan ahead for the retention policy. This helps to, from a storage perspective, plan the storage perspective. Any change in the retention policy, if you increase from say 1 month to 3 months or 3 months to 6 months or to a year, the amount of storage requirement will go up. So this will have an impact on the AVS sizing. So please go ahead and plan your retention policies much ahead. Any changes may not be immediately reflected. We do have certain algorithms and optimizations in place for which we build the directed structure and the metadata that is required for all these storages. So request here is do plan your retention policies ahead and better not to change a lot in that area. Now, as and when the number of targets you want to monitor increases, please keep in mind that you have to resize refill in the spreadsheet to calculate the sizings again. If you start with 10 and you're now 100, the specs that are with 10 will not be able to support your system when you start leveraging it to monitor 100 targets. Now, moving on to the best practices from an agent perspective is that for a given agent, the max trail it can go or support is 20 trails. If you're trying to go beyond it, please refill the spreadsheet again. Now, if you're planning to go for a remote collection, it is only supported for table trails and the agent can be on a remote host. This really helps if you don't want to have any third-party software on the host, on the database host. Now, with the latest versions like of the update of AVDF, we have come up with a concept of agentless, which means that it can be there on the AVS itself. Again, this is for the table trails, and the audit rate collection is slow. So you can also opt for this solution. So these basically are some of the best practices, filling up the or coming up with the sizing guidelines or the best practices in terms of deployment when you're planning for an audit collection. Now we'll move on next when we are planning for leveraging database firewall for network-based monitoring. So we'll cover these 5 points. The first one to begin with is what mode to choose for. So database firewall can be deployed in 3 modes. The first is proxy, where it will be inline of the traffic between the applications and the target database itself. It can be used for monitoring as well as for blocking capability. The next one is the host monitor, where an agent will be deployed on the target, database target. It helps in sniffing the traffic from the network cards and forward it to the database firewall for further analysis. Now this, because we are sniffing, we get a copy of the traffic. It can be only used to monitor and not block. The third way of deploying is through out of band, where the traffic is mirrored from the switch, and it is again copied back to the firewall for further analysis. Again, we get a copy of the traffic, and hence it can be used only to monitor the network traffic and not for blocking capability. Now, okay, so how do we size them? So we refer back to the same spreadsheet. The input parameters do change here. We're talking about, okay, what is the number of targets we want to monitor? What is the average number of SQL statements that are logged by that target per day, and what is the retention that you would like to have in terms of getting or storing those logs. For a couple of things. One is, as again, plan for a retention policy is much ahead, and also you can get the SQL statements per second from the AWR report. So choose a time period where the targets would be busy, run the AWR at least for 48 hours, and from the AWR report, you should be able to get the SQL statements per second. You can use that as an input parameter in the spreadsheet. Output remains the same. It gives you the specification in terms of the CPU, the RAM, and the storage requirements from a database firewall appliance perspective. Now, moving on in terms of how or what you can do in terms of the network deployment. Ajay, if you can go to the next slide, please. So we get a lot of queries around in terms of how to deploy the database firewall when it comes to the proxy mode, and if you want to have a physical or a logical network separation. When we mean for a physical, it means that you have a dedicated set of network cards and for each database, and the traffic does not get mixed up in the firewall, but goes through a dedicated channel. So here is an example where we have where the database firewall has two separate network cards for each subnet, and the clients connect to them, but the database firewall itself uses a dedicated network card to talk to the databases in different subnets. But if you're okay with a logical separation, then you can just use one database firewall, a single NIC, and it has multiple monitoring points, which means that it can listen on multiple ports for each of the databases, and the traffic is routed to them. So this is a best practice based on whether you would like to have a complete network segregation, or you can go for a logical. Now, moving on to the next slide, if we can talk about, okay, so we talked about the sizing spreadsheet and the network deployment best practices. But overall, what are the best practices for database firewall? Choose the deployment mode based on your need, whether you would like to go with a proxy, host monitor, or out of band. Configure HA for the reliable services. We have this concept of resilient pair for host monitor and out of mode deployment. For the proxy, we have the concept of database firewall nodes, which can be an active or active passive configuration. For the DC and DR configurations, we would like to recommend to have database firewall HA instances, one HA instance in DC and another HA instance in the DR site. As your target monitoring grows, please leverage the spreadsheet and have a resize of your sizing requirements. The last piece that I would like to talk about is what are the best practices for, or how we would like to go ahead for the database firewall policy itself. So when it comes to the database firewall policy, we have a default policy in place, which when you register a target and start collection, it gets into play. It has three policies basically. One is to capture the login and logouts, and the other one is to capture the DDLs and the DCLs, and the third is the default rule, which passes all the traffic, but it does not log anything. If you want to have a custom, we would recommend this is to have a whitelist of application traffic. If that is the use case where you do not want to monitor any SQLs from your application, then you can whitelist them using session context rules. And also, if you're just interested in monitoring of privileged users, what are the activities that they are doing, and also what SQL statements or what activities are done on the sensitive objects that you have, you can use the concept of global sets, and you can have or define the database firewall policies, and that will help to meet the requirements or your use cases. You can always, for any of these configurations, you can always go back and look how the policies have been written in the default policy, and you can make a copy and then modify them. I think that's all from my end. If there are any questions, we'll be waiting at the end, as Nazia said. But for now, we'll go ahead with the summary part.
Yeah, a quick check on the time, Nazia, if you can just wrap in another 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. I will try. Yeah. So summary, I will just talk about. So we talked about AVDF as a database activity monitoring solution. So with all these features, now AVDF has 4 important pillars of pie, which basically completes its functionality. One is that you start with assessing your security posture and discover sensitive data, followed by defining audit policies and auditing what auditing policies or activity monitoring policies you have. And once you have that, you start reporting and alerting, and finally have a prevention and protection layer. This process is a continuous process. Then after some time, again, you would like to assess your security posture or discover sensitive data, refine your audit policy, refine your reports and alerts, and refine your prevention and protection layer. So that's what it gives, a comprehensive, I would say, database security, database activity monitoring along with the database security posture management feature. One very important thing that I would like to share here, that all that functionalities that we just talked about, okay, everything you can try by yourself if you do not have any AVDF deployment, or if you have any older release update of AVDF deployment. So the latest release update is RU11. I repeat, it is RU11 is the latest one. And if you scan this QR code, you will be redirected to AVDF Live Labs. It's 24 hours available, free of cost for you. You can use either something called green button or brown button. Green button is that where Oracle itself gives you a dedicated system for certain period, where on Oracle Cloud, where you can go deploy. So everything is there. Audit server is there, database firewall is there, and even one target we are giving you to leverage and see how that functionality works, okay? Or you can go and download the stack and deploy in your OCI tenancy if you have. Okay, so this particular live lab is very popular, one of the most popular live labs under our DB security category live labs. So please go and experience all these functionalities all by yourself. Okay, I would say that don't believe me, and you go and use that and then give your feedback. Okay, so from AVDF perspective, we would really like to join the hands, and this is our partnership. DBSecSig, anyways, Angeline is doing it, but mainly from the AVDF perspective, we have a dedicated, strong development team locally available in India. We have dedicated product manager, which is Angeline in your time zone. You can always reach out to me, but yeah, if a time zone is a concern, that Angeline is there, and then she can can address most of your queries, and if not, she can pass it to me or the development team. If you like to be part of customer adoption program, you can drop email to us. Another thing, and I will share that email ID with you shortly. And another thing, that I have started a user group on LinkedIn. Okay, it is so please request for it and I will review and approve it. You can scan this QR code. The idea is expanding AVDF community. Put your questions there. All our experts are there on that group. There are chances that a lot of your small doubts get clarified there in itself, and you learn with community, right? What others are doing, what kind of a scale they have, and all that, right? So that's the idea, so that we can help each other more efficiently and effectively. So please join this group, and I will approve your request. With that, I have a third poll where there are many new regulations impacting all of us in India, whether it is DPDP or MCA or RBI guideline. So we would like to know, are there any audit requirements that you are having trouble meeting with your current AVDF capabilities, if you already have? This answer is in yes and no. But what I would like to say is that if you are saying yes, okay, if you have in trouble meeting some of the requirement through AVDF, then please share your detail in the email that I will share, recently. Now, I will just share after this slide. So if you have any question, please do that. I will let it run for another 10 seconds. So some are yes, some are no. So please, whoever is saying yes, please drop an email. Okay, I'm going to end this poll now. And oh, we have one more poll, which is like, we would like to know which topic would you like us to cover in our upcoming DBSec for India. So we have listed down some of them. Please go ahead and check that. This is a multi-choice question, so all the options are there. So you want us to cover TD and key management, you want us to cover data safe, or how you can effectively use all the security features which are available in Oracle database. You would like to cover authentication and authorization methods in Oracle database. How can you do that? You want to cover data discovery and masking, and finally security, how you can secure autonomous databases or the security functionalities in autonomous database. Okay, I'll go ahead and end this poll also in another 5 seconds. So if you are answering, please go ahead and answer it. Okay. Okay, so I think this is our final slide. These are the few sessions which Angeline has planned for next upcoming DBSec. If you have any query related to any of database security solution from today's presentation or any upcoming one, we have this dedicated email ID for you. This I will read out. It's dbsecuritysig, SIG_IN @oracle.com. Okay. So note down this email ID. And if you have any question related to Oracle database security, please drop an email to us.